Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder, along with Jenna Blum, of A Mighty Blaze, and we're really thrilled today to have Stephen McCauley. And you only call when you're in trouble. Look at this great cover. We're going to talk about this cover later. Um, I wanted to say that I have put a link in the comments section for all of you to make it really easy for you to find all of Stephen's books. Just go to bookshop.org. It'll take you right to your favorite indie. Also, I wanted to tell you, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And I see we already have one from Kimberly Diaz. So thank you, Kimberly. I'll be asking them as soon as I talk to Stephen for a while. Don't forget to sign up for our YouTube station, where this interview will live forever. And so here we go. So Stephen McCauley has worked at hotels, kindergartens, ice cream stands, health food stores, and he even set up a house cleaning service. He's the author of My Ex-Life and Significant Others, The Object of My Affection, True Enough, Alternatives to Sex, The Man of the House and the Easy Way Out, and of course, You Only Call When You're in Trouble, which is this wonderful, wonderful book. Stephen has also taught at UMass, Harvard, and now Brandeis, my old alma mater, where he co-directs the creative writing program. Films of his books were made from True Enough, The Easy Way Out, both in France, and of course, The Object of My Affection with Jennifer Aniston. You Only Call When You're in Trouble is an Indie Next Pick, which is a very big deal, which is great for January. It's got some rave blurbs, funny, poignant, joyous, but most of all, affirming our connection to one another. Andrew Sean Greer. A perfect, beautiful novel. Jane Green. Carol Angela says, delicious. And I say it was absolutely, it was really such a moving, wonderful book, so much about what we owe others and what we owe ourselves and how we connect. And so thank you so much for being here, Steve. I'm so happy you're here, and welcome to Mighty Blaze.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you for all you do for writers in general. You're an extraordinarily generous person and a great literary citizen, and I'm
glad to hear that.
Speaking of Brandeis, do you recognize the background? This is, I'm actually at my Brandeis office.
Oh my God, where is it? Which building is it?
RAB.
Yes, I did. My old dorm room was on North A, room 204.
That I don't know. I only know the building I'm in and this little corner of the campus. That's
oh my God. Well, we're going to talk about that too, but I want to talk about the book first. Okay. So this is really a book about, what we really owe others, and when does it get to be too much, and when does it get to be not enough? It's the story of Tom, who dotes on Cecily, his niece, but she's the one who she only calls when she's in trouble, and he adores her. He calls her the love of his life, in the sense that she's just always been a part of his life and always will be a part of his life. But it's something that makes Tom's boyfriend uncomfortable because he feels that Tom is spending too much time with him. So I wanted to talk first about that. What do we owe other people? I mean, you obviously were thinking about that when you were writing this book, and the answer to that came out in a lot of ways that are really, really profound. Do you think we owe people everything, or do we owe them everything until it gets to be at the expense of ourselves?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I began writing the book. I was having lunch with a friend, and she said that she has always felt responsible for taking care of her sister, and financially. And the thing that surprised me about this is that the sibling in question is this incredibly capable, intelligent, professional person, but also someone who I happen to know never really took her sister's advice when it came to financial matters or decisions about, professional investments and so on and so forth. And so I began wondering, I'm one of three brothers, and I'm in the middle, and I'm the irresponsible one in my family. Both of my brothers are incredibly capable, and they've got families and jobs and children and everything else. But it did get me wondering if someone would I do that? Would I be willing to give up so much of myself to take care of someone else, especially if they never
Reciprocate.
never reciprocate and never like take my advice. Of course, we all think our advice is great. And that was kind of the question that I was playing around with. And Tom, as you indicated, the architect, who's sort of the main character. There are kind of three central characters in the book, but he's kind of the heart and soul of this. Is at a moment in his life where he has an opportunity to create this architectural legacy project for himself as he views it. But he'll only be able to do this if he ignores the calls from family. And this kind of propels him into their orbit once again. And, I guess I feel I don't ever write with a message, I kind of eschew that in novels. I feel like it doesn't work that well. But it is true that I feel we're kind of in a moment where there's a lot of, I feel like citizenship and good citizenship is kind of not emphasized quite enough.
Right.
And I wanted to create a character who makes a lot of sacrifices, but there is some intrinsic value in that for him. I don't know if we all owe everything to everyone, indefinitely, but I feel as if Tom, the central character in this book, must, give of himself.
I love Tom. I thought he was there were so many. The thing about this book was there's kind of like all your books, it's very, very funny and engaging and entertaining, but there's also some serious, almost like a slightly mournful thread through there, because a lot of it is also about aging, aging out of a job, about what we want becoming different as we age. And what I loved so much is that, to me, it felt that Tom was thinking about this, and he actually at the end got braver because he had this need to do something beautiful and worthwhile. And also there was one scene, I don't want to give it away, but it's at the end, and it involves I'll just call him his boyfriend, where he sees this guy is happy, and he felt happy about it too. It was a recognition about love and how and why love matters. And it just moved me so, so deeply. And it made me think that you must have been thinking a lot about, how do we live the rest of our lives in a way that is meaningful and beautiful? And how do we get ourselves to think about that when there's so much noise outside all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I do think about that a lot, and I think about this, that there is something really beautiful about being able to accept that there's something meaningful for everyone in someone else's happiness, and so even though that his, ex-partner's happiness is not sort of what he wanted because it doesn't involve him.
Right.
If he can participate in that in some way, then that kind of lifts him as well. And, look, as writers, I think that there's always this question, what you do, helping other writers to publicize their work and so on, is a little bit of that, I think. It's like celebrating someone else's success, celebrating someone else's, good reviews or something, even if you wish it were your own. It really does lift you in some ways. And I can't say that, I've always felt that way. When I was younger, I was much more likely to, be envious and those kinds of things. And it's really like a huge relief to not feel that way so much anymore.
Yes, it is. And I think also part of the beauty of age is that you realize that, I mean, you can see something that, like, oh, somebody won the Pulitzer Prize, and you can see it as, and you didn't. Or you can look at it and say, like, yeah, that person won the Pulitzer Prize, but you know what? Their partner just died very suddenly 2 weeks ago, and they have a cancer or whatever. I mean, everybody's going through tough times, and everybody has a different story, and they are winning whatever particular prize that you wanted is just part of that story. It's like you don't
You
see
know,
the rest.
Caroline, honestly, so long ago, I gave up the idea that I was ever, going to win prizes. And that was another relief. It's like, I don't even worry about that. I mean, that's just never going to happen for me. And I'm just going to, appreciate what good things come my way, and I try to like my work a little bit. I think that's another thing, like, I don't know. I used to watch Project Runway all the
Right,
time.
right. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you'd always say, like, "Oh, well, even if I get voted off this week, at least I love, this thing that I created." And I would always think, God, that would make me feel worse, if I love
Yeah.
this piece of clothing that I created, and that gets me booted off the island. But actually, it's true. It's like, I have to say, like, the last couple books, this one and my previous novel especially, I really like them. And so I hope people like the book. I hope it does well. But that kind of personal contentment with the work is what is most deeply satisfying, really. And the
It
rest
is.
you can't shape. You can't
You
really
can't,
control.
you can't, yeah, you can't take. There's actually, I've never ever watched Doctor Who, but somebody sent me a clip that haunts me every single day where the Doctor Who went back and got Vincent van Gogh, who was starving, of course, and suicidal. And he brought him back to present day to the Met, where they were doing an exhibition of all of Van Gogh's work. And Van Gogh was just staring, and all these people, of course, are walking around pontificating on how brilliant it is and why. And at the end of it, Van Gogh is sort of crying. And he never once says to any of these people, I'm Van Gogh. You're talking about me. This is my exhibit. Instead, he cries. He thanks Doctor Who for bringing him there. And then he wants to go back home so he can paint. And to me, that's what it is to be an artist. I mean, yeah, the accolades are nice, but what really counts is that need to do your art and how it impacts others. And the rest of it isn't really your business.
Right. You can't control it. So
You can't control it. But I want to talk about your writing, because you have a way of saying something, or actually your characters say something that's so hilarious that I was stopping to laugh. I forget the line, but it was something about, somebody was talking about something and saying, oh, it was like a person who, you'd have to find someone who liked Steven Spielberg, or I don't remember the context, but it was a really funny line. But what I was wondering about, because it was the genius of it, was I didn't see you, the author, saying that at all. I totally believed it was coming from the character. And that actually gave it a deeper humor than if we knew that, oh, that's Steve McCauley. He's funny. Of course he's going to say that. Are you conscious of the humor when you're writing it? Or is it just you're so deeply in the character, it just comes out?
I mean, I think I don't really I'm kind of a socially awkward person, and I've always been an introvert. And so I think that one of the appealing aspects of writing for me has always been that I get to have a voice in the world, but I don't actually have to, speak it out. And so the point of view of the characters is probably similar to my own, I would say. In some cases, but yeah, I mean, I feel as if it's coming from the character, if it feels like it's true to them, that you can say something that's a little bit exaggerated, a little for comic effect, but it's only really funny if it also has some kind of truth behind it and truth about the characters. We were talking before we came on here about this movie Saltburn, which I know like. I didn't like it because I felt like the characters' actions, which were kind of fun to watch, but just didn't come from any kind of psychological truth as I understood it.
No, that's true. That's true. I
And
mean, I really like the movie, but that's an excellent point because that's true.
And I think that's true for humor too. If there's not some kind of, psychological truth underneath it, it's just not as funny and, human truth. So,
I want to talk about architecture and the spaces we live in because it's so important in this novel. Um, Not just in the sense of, Tom trying to create something beautiful and his thoughts on the tiny house movement, but just in the sense of where we feel comfortable. What places make us feel comfortable and what places don't. So I was just really curious about your relationship to where you live now and how you feel about that. Do you, place obviously must be very important to you.
yeah, place. I was thinking about that because I think like in most of my novels, there is at least one piece of real estate that is pretty much a character in the book.
Yeah.
And usually they're places that I like to imagine myself in, because because I'm a very slow writer, and so I spend years in these locales, and so if it's like a horrible environment, I don't want to spend time there. It makes me, and I have enough trouble sitting down to write without that. So I like to kind of enter into these places. I mean, Tom, the architect at the center of this book, is specializes in tiny houses, and I have always loved small spaces. I love sleeping in kind of narrow, enclosed spaces, which makes me very hopeful about death. Like, I will be a very comfortable corpse, I think. What time is it? And the irony is that I have lived with someone for 30 years who is, or alleges to be anyway, severely claustrophobic.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And so the kind of places like when I go to New York, my favorite hotel is the Jane Hotel, which is in the West Village, and the rooms are 50 square feet. And it's like perfect. It's a train compartment kind of feeling. Or it was actually built as a seaman's hotel in the late 1800s. So in fact, they are kind of built like ship's cabins. And that would be completely impossible for him to do that. And so when I gave this specialty to Tom of designing tiny houses, I thought, oh, this is great. This will allow me to spend hours online looking at videos about tiny houses, and I don't really, believe me, I don't want to live in a tiny house, something under 300 square feet or whatever it is, but a small compact space is always preferable to me. I was at Yaddo once or twice actually, and which is this people who don't know, this writers colony in Saratoga Springs, and I was given this big opulent room, and I couldn't sleep in it. And and there was like the servants' quarters was down the hall, and there were a couple of rooms down there that were unoccupied at the time, and I would like sneak down there to sleep. But that's kind of how I am with, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. I just find it so interesting because my very first apartment in New York City was so tiny. I had to have a pull-out bed, but I loved it. And the reason why I loved it was because it was mine. It was like my own place. And also that no matter where I was, I could look at the door so that nobody could break in without my knowing that. Yeah. So I felt very safe. I felt very safe. But I do believe that houses, or that where you live, you can sort of feel that the building or the home either likes you or it doesn't. Do you ever feel that? Sometimes.
That the place doesn't like me. I'm too self-centered. It's always I like the place or not. at most. But I don't want. I have a perfectly nice, very roomy apartment in Cambridge, which I'm extremely grateful for, and I'm very happy to live there. But
Cambridge is great. I want to talk about the Title IX stuff in the novel. There's a Title IX investigation against Cecily, and it's threaded through the whole thing. And I kept getting more and more worried, and it was just so brilliant the way you resolve that. I mean, I'm not going to give it away. I don't want to talk about what happens at the end, but it was almost a celebration because it was so great. I wanted to know, did you have that planned out before you even wrote it, or did it just sort of come to you organically? You know what? This is the way that should end for this investigation.
Well, no, I didn't have it planned out at all. And in fact, I changed it. I wrote it one way and then I wrote it another
Oh,
way.
really? Okay.
And but I yeah, I Cecily is the niece that you referenced.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that. Yes.
And she is a professor of American Studies at a small college outside of Chicago. And she gets called into the administration to say that a student has filed a Title IX complaint against her for inappropriate behavior and so on. And it really undermines her entire life, her relationship with her boyfriend, her professional prospects, and so on and so forth. And I didn't want to write about, what interested me was that there is kind of a gray zone to this, I felt. Cecily clearly is not in any way guilty of what she's accused of. But there are certain aspects of her behavior that were kind of unprofessional, that she could have done differently, and that probably would have led to a somewhat different outcome. The inspiration for this was, I once had a student who it was like a Friday night. It was late on a Friday night, and I got a call from a student in one of my classes, and who said, "Will you read me a story?" And it was late on a Friday night, and I was like, "No, I can't, and I'll see you in class on Monday." And then the next day. I called my the chairman of my department, and I said, I just want to say that this happened because I don't know.
To protect yourself. That's smart.
Myself. And like before I had even finished recounting this event, he said to me, "Why do your students have your phone number?"
Oh, God, that's right.
Yeah. And like for 25 years I had been putting my phone number on my syllabi, because honestly, like the whole reason was because I didn't then, and I still don't know how to pick up my voicemail on my office phone. And so I just thought, well, this is much easier. But I stopped after that.
Yeah, it's funny. You know what? I put my email up on my syllabus, which was a total mistake, because then you start getting all these personal stuff, and you have to know where to draw the line. But I loved the way you handled it. So are you saying that? So do you map out everything before you start to write, or do you just have an idea that this is what I want to write about? I want to write about how people connect, and families, and tiny houses. How much do you know before you start writing?
I think I know a lot, but it turns out I really know very little. Honestly, the last two novels I've written, this one and My Ex-Life, I did something that when I was in graduate school at Columbia getting an MFA, one of my teachers was Richard Price, who was a novelist.
Oh, I love Richard Price.
Oh, great. He's really a great writer.
He's great.
Yeah. But one of the things he said in this workshop was, one way to write a novel is you write a list of scenes that you can imagine between your characters, and you just look at the list and you say, okay, this one interests me the most. I'm going to write that first. And then you kind of work your way down the list, and don't worry about writing the connective tissue and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, I had never been able to do that for the first 6 novels I wrote. But with the last one, My Ex-Life, I thought, this is the only way I'll be able to finish this novel if I do that. And so I just wrote whatever I wanted to write about these characters. And I ended up with a vast, stack, because I write longhand, of notebooks. And then I began assembling them. So I had no idea how the thing was going to unfold or where it was headed. And my sort of metaphor that I used was that this was like shooting a documentary film, and I was just going to shoot all this footage, and then I would assemble the narrator, assemble a narrative later. And it's a very inefficient way to write.
I was going to say, it must have taken you forever.
Well,
but it must also be freeing in a way too.
It's very freeing, and it's also it's a great way to get to know the characters, and not impose a story on them, and not impose actions on them that feel like they're outside of who they are as people, as you get to understand them. So it's clearly not for everyone. I think, based on what I have seen, that you tend to outline things first, right?
Yeah, but the outlines change a million times. It's mostly like my writing volume, where I can say, well, I have this written down, so it's obviously a strong enough idea to have it written down, so I can proceed from there. But no, I rewrite it over and over again, because, as you say, there's always surprises and changes, and you can't
just that sort of bubbles up out of a conversation characters are having, and it feels like, oh, that I didn't expect that. I mean, not that I don't believe in this, like, oh, this character appeared to me in the blah blah blah, but I mean,
yeah, don't you wish that would happen?
Yeah,
I always think, like, that would be great, but it doesn't happen. Tell us about being a star in France.
Well, that star may have maybe a little tarnish. I don't think a lot of the books have done so well over there. But there was, but my books, some of them have done very well there. And as you mentioned at the beginning, a couple of them were made into movies there, which was really fun. And my experience was that, like, French filmmakers really wanted my input on the script, and
Wow.
we're like, I'm going to come over to Boston and we're going to sit down with the script and make sure.
Wow.
It's like, really? Like, anyway, so that was a very fun experience.
So now I want you to tell us about your yoga books, Ray Mitchell and yoga books.
Yeah. After I finished my 6th novel, which is called Insignificant Others, which is a sort of prescient title in a way, because I don't much like that book. But anyway, I got a call from an editor I had worked with at Simon & Schuster, who was now at Penguin, and they were doing this thing where they were, I won't get into all of it, but anyway, it was kind of like, she knew that I did a lot of yoga. And when we worked together, we would go to yoga classes together and so on. And she wanted to publish a series of novels set at a yoga studio in LA. And so I had to audition for this by writing, 25 pages or something. And,
wow.
And it was really fun. Because I felt very free, because I knew they weren't going to be published under my name. And so I could just kind of have fun with it and have all these crazy things happen. And
do you do yoga yourself? Do you like yoga?
I do. Yeah. I've been doing it since I was like actually since I was a teenager, I've been doing it.
Wow.
And so I really, yeah. And, the other great thing about that gig was that I got to go to all these yoga classes and yoga festivals and that kind of nonsense. And, like claim it as a tax write-off. So
Yeah, yeah. Yoga is very centering. We have actually a question for you, which is, okay, I see that you're giving a book talk on the 9th in Cambridge. Will you be taking your book launch on the road?
well, no.
Nobody's really touring that much anymore. It's just,
I'm not touring at all.
well, that's, you know what? I'm actually happy to hear that.
Well,
But
you know what, Caroline, the truth is that, yeah, I mean, I don't know. In my hometown of Cambridge, I have a lot of friends and family and that sort of thing, and I can get a lot of people to come to the bookstore. But in a lot of places, that's much more complicated and difficult, and it's just not worth.
it's not worth the expense to do it. I know.
It's also not worth just the hassle I find for travel and so on, and yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I love virtual events because you can do them from you never see the audience unless they're asking a question. And please, everybody, if you have questions, pop them in the chat. And also, you're in your space, which is so important. But I really feel like the trend now is, since the pandemic, is not to go out. So I want to ask you, what's the worst and best advice anyone has ever given you, not just in terms of writing, but in terms of life?
Oh my God. I am so unprepared for that. I mean, I honestly don't know. I would say that, like,
what do you tell your writing students?
Okay, well, yeah, I guess if we narrow it down to writing.
Okay, let's narrow it down to writing.
What I tell my students is, well, okay, the best advice. Okay, and I always end the semester with this for my students: send thank you notes. It's great advice, and not emails. I mean, like, thank you notes in an envelope with a stamp on it, and then I have to explain what an envelope is and what
Yeah, it's a different thing.
It's a different thing, but it's that honestly, that's like, okay, that's really good advice.
That is good advice.
That's what I give. That's the advice I give my students.
I
What
actually
I mean is, send me a thank you note after the semester for all of that.
but it's true. It's like there's something, actually, Caroline C. told me to do that early in my career. She said, you know what? Just write a thank you note. Like, do it once a month to a writer you love. Don't ask for anything. Just sort of write a nice letter. And I said, oh, all right, I'll try it. And I wrote a letter to John Irving. And I was absolutely stunned because I got a letter back. It was this 3-page handwritten letter saying, I looked at your letter and I reread it 3 times and I couldn't find the ask. And then I realized you weren't asking me anything. And so I decided, well, I'll write back. And it was just a lovely thing to do. So I think that's excellent advice. Oh, and we have the writer Elizabeth Benedict here. This is great. Hi, Liz. She said, Steve, tell us about the title. Was it your first or your 10th or your 9 millionth title? It is a great title. You only call when you're in trouble.
That was not my first title. The first title was The Responsible Party.
Oh, this is so much better.
I know. My editor, I turned in the final draft of this, and the editor sent me this email saying, the subject line of which was, big problem or something like that. And I thought, I'm going to do that whole thing. But it was just the title. She said, like, nobody wants to read about responsible people. And I said, yeah, I guess you're kind of right. So
they're trying to be responsible in your novel, but it's so much deeper,
I said, well, what about The Irresponsible Party? And she said, no, that sounds like a teen movie, with Michael Cera or something.
Oh, God.
So she actually, like, pulled a couple of lines out of the book. And one of them was some complaint that Tom made saying, you only call when you're in trouble.
Right. It's in the book.
Maybe even Cecily says, I only call when I'm in trouble or something. And and kind of communicates the same thing. Although I find that people think, oh yeah, I know people like that. But then they can't remember the title because it's long. But I don't think titles are getting longer, Caroline.
Yeah, titles are definitely getting. I've seen longer and longer titles. I'm superstitious, so I try to keep it to 3 words sometimes.
What's your
But
new title again?
Days of Wonder, 3 words.
Three. Yeah.
Then before it was with or oh no, the other one was 4 words. So it sort of depends. But before we run out of time, I want to talk about the cover because this cover is so gorgeous. It feels like a splash. There's like splashes of water. She's in trouble. But it's also, there's a lot of water imagery in the book. Was this your first cover choice? Do you have input in your covers? I mean, it's a wonderful, even like the font is also, it's great. It's like there's emotion in this line. Like, you only call when you're in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, they did some covers before this one, which were really confusing to me and not very aesthetically appealing. So then, I was sent like 5 different covers, and the first 4 were all very similar. And then this one kind of popped on the screen, and it was really great. And so I thought it was like an incredibly dynamic cover, but
It is.
sort of off-brand for, not that I have a brand, but it's sort of like, off-brand for my covers in general. And I sent it to Eleanor Lipman, and I said, like, what do you think of this? And she said, if you don't use that cover, I want to use it.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, that's great, because I also ran the title by her, and she said,
She's
"Oh,
great with titles.
that's a great title." So Eleanor really is responsible for everything related to this book.
Oh, that's great. Shout out to Ellie Lippman. That's great. We have another comment from Liz Benedict. She said, Lisa C. wrote an essay about her mother in the Mother Anthology called A Charming Note. And she begins by saying, my mother always said, write 1,000 words a day and one charming note. It's a lovely thing to say. It's absolutely a lovely thing to say.
And Liz Benedict's memoir, Rewriting Illness,
yes,
is available now, and it is a fabulous work of nonfiction.
I'm writing it right now.
About her struggles with cancer, but stylistically, it's a really brilliant book and a wonderful, engaging read.
Liz is a wonderful and engaging author. Here we go. I got it up there. Okay, yes. Go to bookshop.org and order it. And as you're ordering it, please order You Only Call When You're in Trouble. And, be sure.
And Liz has a I don't know, what do you want to call it? Side hustle? Not really. That's like, this is what one of the wonderful things Liz does is she writes, she works with students to craft college essays.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So she was extraordinary. And that is the career of the main character in my previous novel, My Ex-Life. And Liz gave me most of the lowdown on that career. So.
That is so. You just did something incredibly nice with your shout out for Liz. That's really, Tom would be proud.
I know. So am I done for the day?
Yes, you are actually. We are out of time, but I want to tell everybody out there, don't forget, bookshop.org. I have it's right in the chat. You just have to click on it to get Steve's book and to get Elizabeth Benedict's book, Rewriting Illness, and just to get any other book you want. Thank you all so much for being here. We'll see you next time. And tell your friends that this is going to be on YouTube forever, and it'll be a podcast, so you can also listen to it too. And thank you so much, Steve. And you just stay put, Steve. But everybody else, I'll see you later. Goodbye, and thank you so much.